Welcome to Rotting Jewels. My name is Dana. For new visitors, I have almost 2 years worth of what I refer to as active research on the topic we're going to discuss today on my YouTube channel, which will be linked in the description along with my link tree. We are going to continue a very long journey of challenging the public consumption narratives of the Processed Church of the Final Judgment. You may have heard of them, or may know them under their modern-day iteration, the Best Friends Animal Society, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. In order to challenge the aforementioned public consumption narrative, as in the narrative spoon-fed to the public, we need an idea of how they came to be, what they believe, what they strike down as satanic panic conspiracy theories, and why they tried to distance themselves from the humble 37,700-acre animal sanctuary tucked away in what was once referred to as Little Hollywood in Kanab, Utah. We continue this journey by asking one question.
What is the process?
Oh, must we drag all that up again?
Is it old to the death? Better hold your breath. In this cell, I prevail. Freddy said from hell, ring the bell. When you're finished, I'm a grown man and winning. Sacrifice it to the demons. Know I love it when you screaming. Commit to your thought. Do it now what you lost in the darkness. You will never wake up so conscious, anxious. Why are you so scared of feeling pain, bitch? Devil in your soul, cutting now and then you'll go. Walk on the dark path, kill and you feel that. Never in your life you gotta rush from the kickback. Matt blank, Glock 10, knock on the neck, man. Hear the whispering, devil taking over them. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. All red on me, got the blood up in your hair. Sign your soul to the devil, now you asking is it fair? Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. All red on me, got the blood up in your hair. Sign your soul to the devil, now you asking is it fair?
Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work. Listen to my words of Freddy, tell it do the devil's work.
We have a weird homicide.
Human massacre. 5 were killed.
When you kill somebody, you're killing
The
yourself.
incredible brutality of these savage, nightmarish murders.
Here was Charlie's
I walk and live in murder all my life.
Charles Manson converted intelligent, middle-class kids into putty-like zombies.
The jury could only come to one verdict, guilty.
To explain Manson, it could not be done in words.
What is the process?
No laughing matter.
In preparation for today's episode, I realized that, to some, I may have made some bold claims in part 1 of our Charles Manson misadventure.
Fake gods steal from each other. The difference was that Manson was a pimp. It wasn't about religion where he came from. So I think he probably took Scientology, all of them, religion, but mostly being a pimp.
Did Sharon Tate overhear something that she wasn't supposed to about Sirhan Sirhan? A matter of national security, no less?
The alleged assassin, Sirhan Sirhan, was wrestled away by police.
Sirhan Sirhan was arrested that night and tried for murder. He got the death penalty, but California's death penalty was ruled unconstitutional in 1972. The sentence was changed to life in prison.
I don't even know that the man is dead myself, so if there is any conspiracy, I'm completely unaware of it.
And the process commissioned the family for the hit? Admittedly, I find it strange that this conclusion, and we're really stretching the definition of conclusion, albeit leaving much to be desired, is touted for decades by both INS and the FBI. Now, do I think that they were pulling Ed's leg? No. Ed sought records on the process and was told by a federal agent that what is available is in the JFK library, in the RFK section, and, for lack of a better term, inaccessible. Make of that what you will.
Because to me, he was my hero. He was my champion. He was the protector and the defender of the downtrodden and the disadvantaged. And I felt that I was one. And to have him say that he was going to send 50 Phantom jets to Israel to deliver nothing but death and destruction on my countrymen, that seemed as though it were a betrayal. And it was sad for me to accept, and it was hard for me to accept. And just didn't, and all my hopes were focused on Robert Kennedy. I was his supporter.
That was the quality that Robert Kennedy stood for, was hope.
There was that loss of hope at the same time, and this is the part that really sort of angers me, that this double standard of the politicians, and particularly Bobby Kennedy. On the one hand, during the 60s, during the campaign, he was all in favor of stopping the war in Vietnam, and he wants to bring our boys home. And in the next breath, he wants to send more bombs and more Phantom jets to Israel to kill human beings, but Palestinians in this instance.
I ask, would a matter of national security justify keeping a political patsy like Sirhan in prison? I'm not insinuating the process is the reason Sirhan hasn't been released. I don't believe there is just one single reason. It's a multitude.
When you went to death row, was that a surprise, or did you think, well, if this had happened in an Arab country, it would have been an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and I'd be dead anyway?
It's an interesting question. If I had shot Robert Kennedy in an Arab country, I seriously doubt that any Arab jury or Arab court would have convicted. And if they did, the punishment would have been nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Knowing the dynamics involved, that Robert Kennedy was an advocate of full support for Israel.
But I don't think it's an unfair ask. From William S. Burroughs, The Job Interviews. To date, Mr. Hubbard has refused to publish his advanced discoveries. There is every indication that the discoveries of Scientology are being used by the CIA and other official agencies. Me speaking, I'm sure it's totally unrelated that the Church of Scientology publicly rescinded fair game in October of 1968, not that long after RFK was assassinated.
About 3 years ago, Hubbard introduced a new note into his little kingdom, discipline. He laid down a rigid line of conduct. Since then, the ethics department has taken over more and more. This is one of Hubbard's ethics orders on critics of Scientology, so-called suppressives.
SP order, fair game, may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, or lied to, or destroyed.
The practice of declaring people fair game will cease. Fair game may not appear on any ethics order. It causes bad public relations. This policy letter does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of an SP. L. Ron Hubbard, HCOPL, 21 October 68, cancellation of fair game, John Foster, December 1971, Inquiry into the Practice and Effects of Scientology. Admittedly, I have strong feelings about this topic due to my research, and I should clarify moving forward. Because of my studies, I see Scientology and the process as interchangeable. Scientology being the big umbrella, and the process and best friends and the Satanic Temple falling underneath it. No, you cannot change my mind. That being said, I don't think it's weird to question the idea of the long con regarding Scientologist Gordon Mustaine working at the LA Free Press, the same one that employed Ed Sanders, though I understand not everyone may feel that way.
Most recently, Hubbard wrote this of a group of people who defended against the ethics department.
They are declared enemies of mankind, the planet, and all life. They are fair game. No amnesty may ever cover them.
But, as we learned in Part 1, Gordon Mustaine is the first person to publicly state that Charles Manson was with the process.
And that was a big confirming thing with Ed Sanders and company. Oh, you know, we knew there was something funny going on, and here it is. You know, Manson is part of the process.
People started saying, so you're the devil worshippers who are in with Charlie Manson.
As the spokesman for the church, we could say the Church of Scientology was the first to publicly state Charles Manson was with the process. Now, why in the heck would they do a thing like that?
Charlie was leading a gang of unwashed, drug-using hippies in this free-rolling, orgiastic party where they completely lost touch with common sense. We couldn't have been bothered with a punk like Manson.
I operate under until proven to the contrary regarding Scientology, since so many people fly under the radar in the public eye. A fantastic name for them that I got from Operation GCD is Secret Scientologist. Therefore, I'm assuming Gordon Mustaine's report that Jay Sebring and the LaBiancas were Scientologists is accurate. Candace Bergen, ex-girlfriend of Terry Melcher, who resided at Cielo Drive with him, was a Scientologist in the late 60s. Depending on where you look, she says she got involved to write an article about it. I say, let's see the article. According to members of the church in the area at the time, she was around the LA Org and AOLA in 1969 and was seen at the original Celebrity Center.
We've actually been doing something all year long that surprisingly no one has noticed, and frankly, it is now payoff time. Because I've been quietly engaging in advertising so undisclosed, even the advertiser doesn't know about it. I'm talking about the Church of Scientology. Without their knowledge or permission, I've been plugging them influencer style since February. In fact, for half the year, the Scientology Celebrity Center has been one of the buildings in our backdrop. Incidentally, Dragonstone, one of the castles from Game of Thrones, is back there too. But that's been there since the start of the show. Which building has contained more torture and cruelty? It's genuinely hard to say.
And from Dennis Ehrlich, defector of Scientology and ordained minister of the Church of the Subgenius. Yes, the Bob Dobbs cult that, for some strange reason, maintains control of the Jim Garrison archives, the Mae Brussel archives, and Detective James Jimmy Boots Rothstein, the Honorable Mayor's archives. Ehrlich states, I was there when we had to destroy all records involving Manson. It was in '69, shortly after the murders, which happened nearby the org in which I was working, that the whole org was searched and any reference to Charles Manson was vetted and destroyed. Naturally, the next question to ask is, did they successfully destroy everything? The answer is no. So why did Tom O'Neill state that Manson dabbled in Scientology and left it at that?
How many years did it take you to do this?
In the end, exactly 20 years.
So your book, Chaos, what a fascinating journey this has been for you. A 20-year journey to create this thing.
20 years.
Reading now from the first version of Ed Sanders' book, The Family. For most of the 1960s, Manson sat in jail. Through the tumult of the various liberation movements outside in America, through riots, through assassinations, the beginning of Vietnam, peace rallies, sexual liberation, rock and roll, the Beatles for sale, the Beach Boys, napalm, Hare Krishna, and the growing refusal of women to be victimized, a movement of which he had little awareness. Through all this sat Manson monitoring reality through magazines and hearsay conversation. It was while counting the days at McNeil Island that Manson began studying magic, warlockery, hypnotism, astral projection, Masonic lore, Scientology, ego games, subliminal motivation, music, and perhaps Rosicrucianism. Of irony, Manson seems to have become a protege in prison of Prohibition gangster Alvin Karpis, a member of the evil Ma Barker gang, which left 14 victims dead.
Karpis was promoted to U.S. Public Enemy #1, following the capture of John Dillinger.
Depression of the 30s, well, no man alive. People did most anything just to survive. Here's a story about a man that made his fortune and fame. A Robin Desperado, Alvin Karpis by name. El combined with Freddie Barker and his mom, terrorizing folks right through to St. Paul. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small. As time wore on, all the gals got laid. Nelson, Dillinger, Ziegler, and Fred. In early 36, Hoover's boys moved in.
Alvin, old creepy Karpus, taught Charlie to play the steel guitar and seems to have been a general counselor to the young man, although when interviewed after Manson's arrest, Karpus said that he had considered Manson the last man on earth to go into the mass murder business. Charlie was hooked up on this new thing called Scientology, says Karpus. He figured it would enable him to do anything or be anything. Maybe he was right. The kid tried to sell a lot of other cons on Scientology, but got strictly nowhere. Scientology is a reincarnationist religion that claims to train individuals to experience past lives, to leave their bodies, i.e., exteriorized.
But the phenomena of exteriorization takes place rather easily today in Scientology. Exteriorization is not a stable fact. Exteriorization is the phenomenon of being in a position or space dependent upon only one's consideration, able to view from that space the body and the room as it is. That is exteriorization. One can view the body or control the body from a distance.
And to achieve great power and immortality, among other things. Manson learned about Scientology from one Laneir Rymer, from Gene Deaton, and from Jerry Millman, who was Manson's roommate at McNeil Island Penitentiary. Laneir Rymer, according to Manson's followers, had been active in the study of Scientology and had become a doctor of Scientology as an early rank in the movement, now abolished. Now, I don't know all of the shorthand terminology of Scientology, and I have zero interest in learning it, but we are going to read through some Guardian's Office memos, the church's old CIA involved in Operation Snow White, and while some of it is disjointed, I think it helps paint a better picture regarding the church offering so much money regarding leads on the Gall & Sharp murders and Charles Manson. As an aside, isn't it interesting the Church of Scientology and Polanski's pals both offered up such big rewards right around the same time? Kinda makes you wonder if they were trying to figure out just who knew what, who they could silence, and, well, I guess for the Gray Forces, it's a drop in the bucket. Guardian's Office document, August 2nd, 1976, Ree Manson, yours, 23 May and 25 May 1976. Dear Mary Sue, after spending agonizing days trying to figure out how I was going to find out about Manson's religious upbringing, I came across the most fascinating paragraph in Helter Skelter. It says, while his mother was in prison, Manson lived with his aunt and uncle in Melichin, West Virginia. Manson would later tell his counselor at the National Training School for Boys that his aunt and uncle had some marital difficulty until they became interested in religion and became very extreme. A very strict aunt who thought all pleasure sinful, but who gave him love. So, your observation that anyone with a ritualistic twist had a religious upbringing is spot on in the face of all the other biographical data, which might have shown otherwise, is a bastard son of a prostitute who spent half of his life in jail. I considered the idea of getting B1 assistance in terms of locating them until I suddenly recalled that Nick Nichols, Class 8, and a good old friend, is living in Huntington, West Virginia, and I have asked his assistants on a little PR project to contact them and give them a little interview to glean various pieces of information. He will also visit the boys' school to see if there's any military arts involved as well. So, we may have well come up with something quite usable, as you so correctly wrote. Approaching or obtaining a statement from Manson as regards to his real religion is going to be, of course, a bit of a sticky wicket, but I have already been in communication with Laneir Rymer, his cellmate, who does have a comm line to him presently, and I believe that once the data is obtained from his aunt and uncle, an approach can be made in that regard utilizing this biographical background info as well as the handle. Just thought you'd like to have this bit of info. Much love, Artie. Now, I don't claim to be smarter than anybody else, but it sounds to me like what we just read was what some could call evidence of the church trying to spin a very specific narrative about Charles Manson. Why would they want to do that? The signer of the letter, Artie, made it sound like he was having a real tough time finding out information, so naturally, one would think, did he reach out to Ed? The Ministry of Public Relations, United States Church of Scientology of California, June 29, 1976. Dear Ed, I don't believe that we've communicated previously. However, I have read The Family, and I note the hellish amount of research that went into the book. One point of interest that we had during this whole affair was Manson's earlier religious training, if any. I gather from your research that his parents had little, if any, religious background, nor did he have any religious ally in his family. For our own information, I was wondering if you would have any data regarding the above, such as the denomination of his parents or any particular religious allies that he had, and what their denominations would have been. I also note that there's possibly no record of his baptismal or communion records. Do any exist? If any of the above is handy, we'd appreciate the information. Sincerely, Reverend Arthur J. Marin, Director of Public Affairs, the U.S. Churches of Scientology. Me speaking? I hunted for a response. Anything, any sort of documentation in Ed's files that he replied to this letter. I found nothing. In my opinion, by this time, he was fully aware of the games Scientology plays. Yippee and Mansonite Paul Krasner had sent Ed a rough copy or rough draft of a book that he was working on. I would like to read a passage from it now. I flew to Kansas City to participate in a symposium at the University of Missouri. I would be on a panel with Ken Kesey, who had written to me from Mexico about this big event with Henry Kissinger, B.F. Skinner, and Buckminster Fuller. I, in turn, contacted Ed Sanders, who proceeded to write a new song about Henry Kissinger. However, the Student Activities Office had sent Kesey a copy of the previous year's program. The one this year was honoring the memory of Robert F. Kennedy. So, Ed Sanders wrote another song. If Robert Kennedy were still alive, things would be different today. Richard Nixon would still be on Wall Street, selling Pepsi in Taiwan. The war would be over today, and J. Edgar Hoover would be watching gangster movies in an old folks' home. Before singing it at the university, he announced, in the course of my research in L.A., it became evident that Robert Kennedy was killed by a group of people, including Sirhan Sirhan. In his book, The Family, Ed had written, it is possible that the process had a baleful influence on Sirhan Sirhan, since Sirhan is known, in the spring of '68, to have frequented clubs in Hollywood in the same turf as the process was proselytizing.
Human creations, human ambitions, human conventions, human laws, all these shall be destroyed to make way for a new age and a new way of life.
We talk about the end and the new beginning, and the end of what is now. The structure of things as it is now will end in our lifetime.
Sirhan was very involved in occult pursuits. He has talked several times subsequent to Robert Kennedy's death about an occult group from London, which he knew about and which he really wanted to go see. Meanwhile, the process was busy suing and pursuing Ed Sanders. I had never seen him so shaken. He said he was having trouble sleeping. Occasionally, he mumbled things to himself as though they were marginal notes describing the state of his depression. Ed was such a devout pacifist that he wouldn't eat chicken soup because a chicken had to be killed to make it. And yet, he carried a gun for a few weeks while he was working on the Manson book. At the symposium, he ordered a full vegetarian meal and then couldn't eat any of it. He told me that the higher-up of a cocaine dealer, whose body had been found in the trunk of a car, was killed on a yacht near Miami around Christmas in 1970, but he wouldn't say who it was.
Sometimes you chase a fact for a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember chasing one guy that was, I remember it was this one guy that was supposed to have been at Sharon Tate's house that night and delivered some dope or something. And so I was chasing this guy. I was trying to locate him. I was going through court records. I was looking for this guy, and finally found out where he was and where he lived. I found an address for him. And then they found him in a car trunk in LaGuardia or John F. Kennedy Airport. So I mean, that's the type of blind alley energy you'll expend, and find out you can't interrogate some poor human being who was found in a car trunk. See? So I mean, there was a typical thing of typical problems.
Later, when I checked, the only suspicious death that matched those details was the vice president of a cosmetics company. Now, Sanders said he was working on another book about the Manson case to be titled The Motive. What was the motive? I asked. Sanders seemed nervous. Asked Peter Folger. Folger was the coffee tycoon whose daughter, Abigail, had been one of the victims. She was supporting Tom Bradley as the first black candidate for mayor of L.A., despite the objection of her father, who had a reputation as a racist. While Sanders was researching his Manson book, he received a mafia kiss from a lawyer for Peter Folger. Was he trying to tell him something?
When the sky is gray and the moon is day, I'll be down to get you. Roots of earth will shade, sinister purpose, knocking at your door. Come and take my hand. Burn away the goodness. You and I remain. Did you see the last door? Well, here I am again. Sinister purpose, knocking at your door. Come and take my hand. I can set you free, make you rich and wise. We can live forever. Look into my eyes. Sinister purpose, knocking at your door. Come and take my hand.
We've heard the name Laneir Rymer a few times now, and he is referenced as the main person who taught Charles Manson Scientology in jail.
And Reg, when you go clear, what happens on the meter?
Well, that needle on there is, we'll just magnify the read a bit. It's a bit sticky and tight, you see. Nothing derogatory about you on this. And this would come down, this pointer would be down here to balance it off, do you see? And the needle would float, and I don't think I can, something like that I'm doing now, but that's even too jerky. It's a beautiful sight to see, particularly a Scientologist, I know, but even to anybody outside, this needle just smoothly floating away there. And it wouldn't be affected by anything.
With people, such machines record something, but no one quite knows what. There's a story about a man who was asked whether he was Napoleon. When he said no, just such a machine recorded he was lying. In Scientology, it's a ridiculously short step from such lies to a seemingly scientific theory of past lives, in one of which a Scientologist might have been Napoleon. Faith is blind, and though Scientologists seem in some ways to be scientists in an internal laboratory, their experimental animal, their own personality, They are really just blind worshippers at the shrine of science.
The first document that we have from the Guardian's office is Laneir Rymer's time track. This is essentially a timeline of his life, according to them. I'm not going to sit here and read every single thing in his life. However, I do think that it's interesting that in 1949, he worked for Convair as an aviation metalsmith, and in 1950 went into the U.S. Navy and the Naval Air Force. He worked as an aviation metalsmith and, according to Scientology's time track, flew a lot. Yes, that is a direct quote. In 1953, he got out of the Navy and went back to work at Convair.
And in the Metropolitan runs the bloodlines of other famous Convair aircraft. For these same long production lines have produced gigantic 10-engine airplanes, the famous Convair B-36 intercontinental bomber, powered by 4 jet engines and 6 pusher-type piston engines. The Convair Sea Dart, world's first water-based jet seaplane to break the sound barrier. And from Convair, too, came the R-3Y Tradewind, mammoth water-based transport. The new supersonic F-102 Delta Wing all-weather interceptor was built by Convair to guard America's skies, day or night, and in any kind of weather. And from the Convair production lines came the world's only airplane to ever take off and land vertically and fly horizontally.
I think it's worth noting here that at the time that Laneir Rymer was working at Convair, they were actively engaged in numerous projects with the CIA, primarily competing and working with Lockheed Martin. The San Mateo Times, March 31st, 1955. Germans take to the air again. Germany takes to the skies again tomorrow for the first time in 10 years. A new American-built Convair 340, bearing the Blue Griffin emblem of the German airline Deutsche Lufthansa, takes off from Hamburg and wings south on a passenger flight to Dusseldorf, Frankfurt, and Munich. In May, Lufthansa begins flying to other European capitals, London, Paris, and Madrid. And in June, the German airline will open its transatlantic service to New York. Tomorrow will be a historic moment in West Germany's headlong surge back to a place in the sun. Not a single German plane, not even a Piper Cub, has left the ground since those fateful days of May 1943, when Hitler's Germany surrendered unconditionally, and the old Lufthansa, like Hermann Göring's Luftwaffe, was grounded indefinitely. So yeah, that's a hell of a job, right? In my personal opinion, this gives Mr. Rymer an even spookier veneer, and I think that's pretty hard to do when you're the guy that was primarily responsible for auditing Charles Manson. And then we get into Laneir Rymer's very strange arrest history. According to this time track, in 1956, he went to Connecticut, worked as a cook in a restaurant, then committed his first bank robbery alone in Meriden, and was picked up 20 minutes later, got a 3-year prison term. From The Journal, Saturday, December 29, 1956, J. Edgar Hoover has praise for local police. Personal letters of commendation from J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI in Washington, have been received by local police for the speedy arrest in the December 11th holdup and robbery of the West Main Street branch of the Connecticut Bank and Trust Company. Mr. Hoover, in the letter to the police chief, said, "I want to extend my congratulations to you and the men of your department for your outstanding work, which led to the apprehension recently of Laneir Allison Rymer for the robbery of the Connecticut Bank and Trust Company in Meriden. Your immediate response to the alarm given was unquestionably responsible for the swift apprehension of the criminal." Congratulatory messages, along with individual comments, were sent by the FBI head to all the detectives involved in the arrest. I think it's a little bit strange to get a letter of personal commendation for doing your job from Hoover. However, from The Journal, January 21st, 1957. A sentence of 3 years in the federal reformatory in Chillicothe, Ohio, was imposed today upon Laneir A. Rymer, 25, convicted of the hold-up bank robbery here on December 11th. Federal Judge J. Joseph Smith in Hartford passed sentence after hearing a plea on behalf of the bank robber by Peter Sullivan of Hartford, court-appointed counsel. The lawyer blamed this and previous criminal escapades on Rymer's drinking and asked he be sent to a reformatory so that he would have an opportunity to learn a trade. But he already knows a trade. U.S. Attorney Simon S. Cohen read to the court Rymer's past record, showing he had been convicted of being AWOL from the armed forces, once for auto theft in California and twice for larceny in Springfield, Massachusetts. The article goes on to describe him with red hair, being 6 feet tall. I include this because it might come in handy when we're talking about the son of Sam later on. Back to the Guardian's office document. He was in Hartford, Connecticut jail, then moved to West Street Jail in New York, then moved to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and finally to Terminal Island, all within a few months. He started studying Scientology at Terminal Island by reading books on the subject in the prison library. Quote, read some books, applied some data. Unquote. Met Charles Manson at Terminal Island. Only knew Manson by sight, had no real comm with him. Got out of Terminal Island on a conditional release. Something happened in 1958 that is illegible to read on this document. 1959, released unconditionally from prison, went to San Diego, got into Scientology at San Diego Scientology Center. April 1960, started the Hubbard Certified Auditor's Course.
Well, a person has to have very, very good moral fiber. You might say he has to, you can't, and we will not take anybody who has even the faintly bad background and so forth as an auditor.
June of 1960, finished HCA course, an 8-week course, went to LA to get Qual OKs to audit on HCA, passed. As a reminder, guys, I don't know what a lot of this shorthand means. I apologize. Following month, robs a bank in Riverside, California, and in 1961 starts a 5-year prison stint at McNeil Island in Washington. He met Manson again, and Manson requested that Rymer help him with Scientology. Rymer audited Manson and others on CCHs and worked with him for 15 months, 8 hours a day. June of 1962, transferred to Latuna, Texas prison because Warden Jacob Parker at McNeil didn't like Rymer applying Scientology. The warden was a rabid Catholic who was afraid of Rymer and what he was doing. Rymer did assist on some, which get the medical staff upset because of the results he was getting. Rymer was accused of tampering with prisoners on a medical basis. Continued Scientology work at Latuna. The date is slightly cut off, but this is 1963. Transferred to the Safford, Arizona prison, ostensibly sent to teach literacy courses to Mexican Americans. The real reason, Rymer was campaigning against the coercive education program at Latuna. Rymer started some sort of an independent movement among the Mexamor at Safford, which led to his being placed on top of a mountain to do supply depot watch. He was released from Safford and went to LA, where he did the communication course at the LA Org. Then he was arrested for 2 bank robberies within 20 minutes of each other in Los Angeles. In 1965, he was in the LA County Jail and then went to Lompoc for pre-sentence and observation. Worked with inmates with Scientology and had discussions of Scientology and gave advice to some based on Scientology data. He was sentenced in LA to 10 years and went to McNeil Island in Washington. He escaped from McNeil, was recaptured, and another 5 years was added at McNeil. We're going to diverge from this Guardian's office document for a bit. I don't know about you, dear listener, but it sounds pretty cut and dry that Laneir Rymer was a Scientologist and Charles Manson was a Scientologist. 15 months, 8 hours a day is a long time, especially in jail. From the News Tribune, March 8, 1962. McNeil inmate files complaint. A McNeil Island inmate, Laneir A. Rymer, has filed a complaint in federal district court here alleging that he has been refused permission to practice religion of Scientology at the prison. He also alleges that the prison officials have denied him books pertaining to Scientology. So we have a formal complaint here that supports such an argument. So now we have to question why the church vehemently denies that Charles Manson was indeed a Scientologist. From the Huddersfield Daily Examiner, September 12, 1994. Dennis Kilcommon's article on Charles Manson includes a mention that Manson studied Scientology in prison. This is wholly inaccurate. A fellow prisoner of Manson's in 1961, Laneir Rymer, found some books on the subject in the prison library at Terminal Island Prison. Rymer passed on verbally to Manson some of the things he had studied, but in a statement sworn under oath in 1976, he said, "At no time was Manson engaged in the study of Scientology to my knowledge, and at that time he did not possess the reading skills necessary to have undertaken such a study." He received no training in Scientological practices from me, nor anyone else to my knowledge at any time, and at no time was he a member of or in any way associated with any church or mission of Scientology. As allegations of Manson's Scientology studies tended to grow as the story went from one newspaper to another, Manson's prosecutor, Deputy District Attorney Vincent Bugliosi, stated in a 1971 letter to a church representative, "Nor have we found any evidence in our investigation that Charles Manson was a practicing member of the Church of Scientology at the time of the aforementioned crimes. I hope that the above statement will be of some value to you and your church in the event that anyone in the future accuses the Church of Scientology of being somehow involved. Peter Mansell, Church of Scientology, East Grinstead." Me speaking. I think one thing Tom O'Neill can hang his hat on is showing just how uncredible Vincent Bugliosi was, among other things. But I would like to read a couple passages from Helter Skelter. When interviewing Paul Watkins about Manson's philosophy, Manson had told him that while he was in prison he had studied Scientology, becoming a theta, which Manson defined as being clear. Watkins said that in the summer of 1968, he and Charlie had dropped into a Church of Scientology in downtown LA, and Manson asked the receptionist, "What do you do after clear?" When she was unable to tell him anything he hadn't already done, Manson walked out. As a reminder, dear listener, Candace Bergen, former resident of Cielo Drive, was a Scientologist at the same time, hanging out in the same place. Manson gave as his claimed religion Scientologist, stating that he has never settled upon a religious formula for his beliefs and is presently seeking an answer to his question in the new mental health cult known as Scientology. Although Manson remained interested in Scientology much longer than he did any other subject except music, it appears that, like the Dale Carnegie course, he stuck with it only as long as his enthusiasm lasted, then dropped it, extracting and retaining a number of terms and phrases such as auditing, cease to exist, coming to the now, and some concepts, karma, reincarnation, etc., which, perhaps fittingly, Scientology had borrowed in the first place. Me speaking, but we're about to hear Bugliosi concede on this. He was still interested in Scientology when his annual progress report was written that September. Furthermore, according to that report, that interest has led him to make a semi-professional evaluation of his personality, which, strangely enough, is quite consistent with the evaluations made by previous social studies. He appears to have developed a certain amount of insight into his problems through his study of this discipline. Manson is making progress for the first time in his life. And here, dear listener, is where I say, until proven otherwise, because secret Scientologists are absolutely a thing. Now, I may be unfairly assuming that people have read Chaos, and I'm not discouraging people from it. I think that there's good information to be gleaned. The progress report that Bugliosi is referring to is from Manson's parole officer, an individual that is heavily discussed in Chaos. What else is heavily discussed in Chaos? The Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, reading from Charles Manson, Coming Down Fast by Simon Wells. Dr. David Smith of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic clearly recalls Charlie's bus parked outside the process's Oak Street base. One has to wonder what games Jolly and his underlings here are playing in saying that they clearly observed Manson with the process. His parole officer is saying that Scientology helped him, and yet today, Tom O'Neill can't even give an accurate history of the process, the legal battle with Ed Sanders, and, again, he mentions Scientology twice in his book. I'm not telling people what to think, but this is absolutely a hill that I will die on because there is plenty of evidence to support this argument despite what Tom O'Neill says that there's not enough to meet his standards. I will probably do an episode on the suspicious characters on Tom O'Neill's research team that might provide a lot of insight as to why the process and Scientology really isn't discussed, but that'll likely stay on Patreon. Back to the Guardian's office documents. I'm not going to read the entire thing, guys. We're going to hit the high points. Manson, Bruce Davis, June 22nd, 1970. Dear Mary Sue, there have been numerous new developments on this case, and they are as follows. An individual by the name of Steve Grogan appeared on our lines. I received word that he had made statements that he was a member of Manson's family and therefore started some intel action, which at first consisted of talking to the girls he had been in contact with. By the time I had finished talking to them, Grogan had been put away in jail for car theft. Of course, we did not want it known that a member of the church was trying to see him, so no contact ended up being made. On June 18, 1970, the following report was received by me. Report of an interview with Raul Morales re Charles Manson. Raul arrived in prison on McNeil Island, Washington in 1962 and became a cellmate of Lafayette Rymer, allegedly a trained Scientology auditor, about level 1 in Raul's estimation, and was introduced to Scientology at that time. Rymer was auditing in prison at that time, and in one 10-man cell had managed to gather a group of about 7, all in Scientology. Charles Manson entered later and studied, did TBO, etc., along with his cellmates, and received approximately 150 hours of auditing from Rymer. After a while, however, Manson was screaming to get away from his auditor. In Raul's opinion, he had been severely overrun or something. He eventually managed to get put in solitary confinement to get away from his auditor. Eventually, prison officials got suspicious of the group's strange activities and broke up the group. Subsequently, Raul was released from the prison in 1965. Rymer's wife was in training here at the LA org from 65 to 66. She had disconnected from Rymer. Raul just found out yesterday that another friend, and the name is difficult to read, it looks like Arvin White, later sent Manson books after the Scientology group was broken up on hypnotism and black magic. Raul feels that Manson was righteously flipped out from his auditing. Auditing, of course, was done with no meter and very non-standard, but had not had much of a chance to learn much data when he got exposed to this other stuff and really went off the deep end. And now from another Guardian's Office document, Possibilities re Laneir Rymer. It is interesting to note the following items in Rymer's time track. He ended up with Manson in prison in the late 50s in California and learned about Scientology in prison. How many prisons had Scientology books in 1957? 2 or 3 years later, he ends up with Manson in Washington State, and Manson originates that he wants Rymer, who was now his cellmate, to teach him about Scientology. After about 1 month, Manson may have been fed LSD per a report we have, and then freaked out and wanted to get away from his auditor. Manson said he left his soul in the hole.
A little greenback. Got to find just the kind of losing my mind. Out of sight in the night, out of sight in the day. Looking back on the track, gonna do it my way. Looking back on the track.
So, who gave Charlie acid? Was it Laneir Rymer? Did Scientology send him over the edge? Or did the process?
Charlie would talk about how he was Jesus and the devil all in one, and all men were, but he was more the epitome of it. And he had died 2,000 years before, and we were the only ones going to be saved. The end of the world's a good draw.
Laneir will remain looming in the background, as we'll eventually read how he kept tabs on Charlie and seemed to be quite friendly with some of the family's girls. And there's that whole ending up in Westchester County when the Son of Sam crimes start. But for now, I want to take a step back and see what other Laurel Canyon acolytes the church was keeping an eye on. Continuing from the Guardian's Office memo, re Manson, Bruce Davis, June 22, 1970. Regarding Leslie Van Houten, I conversed with an individual that had known her prior to her being involved with the family, and this individual has been working undercover for me for 3 months, producing very good results from the drug scene. Quote, "When I knew Leslie, she was dramatizing being a flower child very heavily, sweet and soft appearing. People she ran around with were Marshall Patterson, her brother, and her boyfriend Bob Mackey. Yes, dear listener, the same Bob Mackey that drew the original sketch for Marilyn Monroe's dress worn at JFK's birthday party in 1962. Continuing, she was into meditation and had no practical knowledge of Scientology, but was interested in it. Her brother was inducted into the service about the time that I knew her. Bob Mackey's mother had been married to a police officer who had been shot and killed in Northern California. His mother was very loose sexually, from what I understood. Mackey wasn't a drug user." End quote. The interesting thing here is her friendship with Marshall Patterson, a drug user, and although he hasn't come up as a pusher, he's definitely on the lines of the current statewide drug operation, and probably pushes in small quantities. He was excommunicated from Scientology for failure to stop using drugs. So, here's another link we have with the drug traffic we have been working on. The first link being a report, though unconfirmed, that Shapiro had been at Alan Watts' houseboat and that members of the family were there. Okay, there's a lot to digest here, mostly in the latter half of this Van Houten section. Is the Guardian's office monitoring a drug trafficking operation, or are they involved? Honestly, the report is so ambiguous that I can't tell. I do like to remind people it's a chess not checkers move to have a big old boat in international waters with religious tax exemption and protection, especially if you wanted to get into the drug or human trafficking business. Iran Contra, anyone? Next in this memo is Mr. J. Sebring, one of the victims of the Tate murders. Rumors were that he was involved in drug traffic when the murder first went down. This from Terry Schultz, who later turned out to be on a third-party trip. Me speaking. Is third-party trip a Scientology hippie speak for double agent? Who knows? Moving on. I have discussed this with an agent I have had working undercover on drugs also, in this case a female, who is currently doing undercover work for me on the Sharp and Gall murders. She tells me that she was acquainted with various people who got their supply of drugs from Sebring when he was alive. She also indicated that Mama Cass was rumored to be very much into drugs, running a complete and separate organization. She was in Scientology for a time, then blew off our lines. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. Gordon Mustaine presents the image the church is on the up and up with Gall and Sharp, but when we get into the killings, we're going to see that this is hardly the case. It's no secret J. Sebring used and dealt drugs, but if Mama Cass had a competing business, that could complicate things. If two Scientologists, who were celebrities, had competing drug businesses, well, that sounds like a real hellscape.
Scientology is a Californian export, and though it spawned a number of centers that still thrive in the States, the headquarters in Sussex sometimes seems a little America.
Yeah, I guess so.
Quite warm in Los Angeles when I left yesterday, 102 degrees, and about 40 when I arrived here today.
Oh, you're from LA?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people from LA in New York right now. You probably know a few of them.
In some ways, their trip to England reminds one of the LSD trips young Californians are currently going on. For the young, a cut-price cloud cuckoo land inside where anything seems possible. For the older or more hidebound, a mixture of science fiction and psychotherapy that gives their search for something better the blessing of a kind of science, but a science uncritical of itself.
And yes, Mama Cass was a Scientologist. Reading from Esquire, Sink Along with Mama Cass, June 1969. Discussing an evening after a performance, the article states, "I'm sorry, Dave," Cass said. "I really have a pretty voice when I'm not sick." A phone rang, and Carol Samuels picked it up. She put her hand over the mouthpiece and whispered, "It's the Scientology people. They want to come and do a reading or something on Cass between shows." "Don't let them do it," someone said. "They'll freak her out completely." "Mama Cass is resting now," Carol said into the phone. "Thank you very much, but maybe some other time." "She's awfully tired now." Carol listened for a minute, making faces, then she said firmly, "I am sure it would be of great benefit, but some other time, not now. She needs rest. Thank you so much. Goodbye," and hung up. "How'd they get this number?" someone asked. "Dunno," Carol said. "Didn't say." The room had filled with smoke, and Cass began to cough. Someone suggested that fresh air might be the answer, so Carol Samuels in Toronto helped Cass to her feet and trotted her down a backstage corridor to look for an outside exit door. As the three turned a corner, 6 men approached from the opposite end of a long hallway. One of them carried a small dark box, another had books tucked into the crook of his arm. "Oh my God," Carol said. "The Scientology nuts. They've got their tin cans and everything. You take Cass and I'll head them off." Toronto jerked Cass through a handy doorway as Carol tried to outmaneuver the 6 Scientologists. She finally succeeded in leading them into a side room, where she explained the delicate nature of her employer's condition, and pleaded with them to go away. By the time the argument was over, Cass was nowhere to be found. Carol returned to the dressing room, overwrought. "You should have seen their eyes," she said. "It was just like in the Village of the Damned, except these were grown men." My words here. As a reminder, Bijou Phillips, stepdaughter of Mama Cass, who defended her father John Phillips of allegations made by her half-sister Mackenzie that their father raped her, is a Scientologist who, until very recently, was married to Danny Masterson, also a Scientologist and convicted rapist who filed an appeal late last year against his 30-to-life prison sentence. Let's not forget what we talked about in the last episode. John Phillips funding the process. Are we noticing a pattern here? Just me? Okay. This next report I have to include because it very well may be the most insane thing that I've found regarding any women of the family. Evidence from authorized FBI search, Board Technical Bulletin, December 10, 1969, reissued as BTB, June 21, 1975, HCO Bulletin, 10 December 1969, not for distribution, confidential. The chief witness in the Manson trial, Miss Linda Kasabian, has arrived in London, claiming to be L. Ron Hubbard's illegitimate daughter. Now, the aim of the drill is to terminatedly handle the situation. In other words, keep us out of the press, keep the journalists quiet, extract us from the situation with honor, kill the story. Me speaking. Old Hubbs was, for lack of a better term, a pervert. A spook of another breed? Absolutely. A megalomaniacal, charming cult leader? No, I don't endorse that type of propaganda. A pervert that used his fake Space Navy blackmail operation to promote the idea that children are adults in little bodies? Yes. Why Linda Kasabian would say this, I literally have no idea, and I think it's weird that the only place this is seen is in documents retrieved during an FBI raid. You be the judge.
The creed of the Church of Scientology. We of the Church believe that all men have inalienable...
We've still got a long way to go in our Charles Manson misadventures, dear listeners, and it's all leading up to Rome. As a bit of a teaser, and to highlight just how anointed this process research can make you, I just learned a very specific New Left Movement's riot at a certain festival was what prompted Sharon Tate, a woman very interested in Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign who attended fundraising dinners. Oh wait, did I mention Abigail Folger joined Bobby's campaign in April of 1968 too? No? Anyways. And her husband, Polish state film propagandist Roman Polanski, to skip on over to Italy. Maybe that same New Left movement we discussed in the Second American Revolution episode. Maybe. I'd like to end reading from The Garden of Eros, the story of Paris expatriates and the post-war literary scene by John Calder. I asked William S. Burroughs if any sinister organizations or secret services like the CIA were in any way involved with Scientology. You're fucking right they are. The CIA are in it up to their fucking necks.
Beneath the bebop moon, I wanna croon with you. Beneath the lamp sun, I got to be the one with you, with you.